How many times have you been just walking in a game, then you come across something in the world that catches your eye for some reason or another? It might not be even a goal to go there or even have anything there at all. No chests, no loot, no upgrade, it's just a ruined building or an empty room. So why is it there? If there's no items or story, why bother having it? Well, that's easy. It's because of a little thing called environmental storytelling. World building. At least most of the time. I'm sure we've all watched a video or two about these subjects, and I'm no expert or authority on what makes them good or bad for you, but I do know when these things are done well for me, and how and why they got me immersed into the product I'm consuming. There's the love of spectacle, the impossibly huge fantastical towers or creatures too big to exist as we know it. Or there's something more subtle through narrative, aesthetic, or gameplay that can all change how you interact with a story. Good or even just interesting world building is something I look for in any media I consume. It's my favorite thing. Learning the rules and system that govern how the characters move through the story just keeps me more invested than most other elements. Obviously, this is with exception if everything else is really bad, no amount of good world building will make up for it. Going through games I've played recently, I think would be a great start, talking specifically about how a game that in my opinion is probably just a 6 or 7 out of 10 turns into one of my favorite games I've played in a long time. Clash Artifacts of Chaos is strange. It wears a heavy coat of surrealism and absurdism on its sleeve, and I love that. This aesthetic right away is something that will make a lot of people probably turn away from it. Which is a crying shame because it is an extremely good game. The game is heavily stylized, but for me it's in a perfect way, and it's what made me really want to try it initially. Xenozoic is an alien and hostile world. One of the first cutscenes you'll see is an old man being challenged into a game called The Ritual by the rules of the One Law.
We have nothing to give you. I do not wish to fight.
I have an artifact, old man.
No, Grandpa, don't do it.
We are not Corwids, child. This is the only law, and we must obey it.
After playing this ritual, you take control of the elderly man and lose the battle. You're old and weak, you had no chance. You learn right away this world is one for the strong. And seeing this play out, our protagonist engages this opponent who challenges us. We don't have any dice or artifacts, so we take a penalty and get hit first before this fight even begins. This opening scene and segment is so good. It gives you questions that you can ask about the world. What is the One Law? Why do the inhabitants follow it and honor it without question? And it shows you how it will be used in gameplay, because after this fight you end up taking the enemy's dice and artifacts to be used by you, which before combat with most humanoid, or what counts for humanoid in this world, you can challenge them to the ritual, a mechanical part of the game, as well as a core part of the society in this world. The rest of the game is you traveling the land of Xenozoic, first to find a place to take a bird child grandkid from the opening, but later to protect them from the other inhabitants who are trying to take them away from you. The two of you grow and care for one another along the way, similar to Ellie and Joel or Kratos and Atreus, and the whole time the world keeps getting stranger and more alien. Every single part of Clash builds upon its world building. None of it makes sense, and yet it's fully understandable. I'm honestly having trouble trying to articulate what I want to say about this game. I feel any descriptions of the mechanics and how they make the world feel more immersive minimize it to just being another game. Like using small creatures and vegetation to make your healing drink give you different effects that you have to learn by testing out how they work. Or how the scrap you can find can be used to make temporary weapons you can fight with. Taking these mechanics out of the game and describing them feels like it takes away from the simple magic of being in the world for me. And I want to reiterate, this game is just barely above average, and the gameplay is extremely janky. Some systems are just never explained, and you'll have to be patient with it at times. But it's not despite all these faults Clash is a good game, it's because of the faults Clash is a great game. And in the lore of Clash, there are a lot of things that happen that are left unexplained or left up to your interpretation. To me, that makes the world larger than so many other video games. There are two other games in the Clash franchise, Xenoclash and Xenoclash 2, that I don't think I'm going to play, at least not anytime soon. Don't get me wrong, I would love to know more about this game and its world, but I think I got the closure I needed from the game I played, and don't want this series to turn into something that has all the answers for me. There's a fine balance for games and media at large that having multiple sequels set in the same world can start to make the world feel more and more compact. Like the world of Tamriel, which is rich with lore and history. At least it feels that way, doesn't it? But so little of the information you learn when playing these games actually feel like they matter. And it feels like you're sitting in the worst type of history class where you're learning dates and times where people did stuff, events happened, and none of it feels like it actually matters to you, the player, in the world at that moment. None of this information is ever really used by the player mechanically. Hardly any character in-universe would care what Daedric Prince said what to who on what cycle of the moon, so then why should I? It's a hard thing to describe for me. Like in Skyrim and Oblivion, I don't often feel like I'm asking questions about the world or lore. It feels like the game is giving me questions I think I'm asking, just to give an exposition. And the questions I do come up with are mainly just confusing questions of why certain characters aren't doing certain things that are the most obvious solution that writers probably should have thought about instead of just having them sit there idly, not helping, for the whole game. It just feels to me like when I play the Elder Scrolls, there's no reason for me to have theories or speculate about what's happening in the world or lore, because there's gonna be an answer for it in a book somewhere in the game, online, that I can go and read and get a very direct answer for. This is exasperated in a series like the Elder Scrolls as well because of how many games there are in the setting now. With each new game that comes out, the setting loses more of the mysteries that players like me might have about the world and makes the setting less magical to be involved in. These narrative issues, along with things like one character being able to be all the leaders of all the guilds, Giga Chad, Mega Hero who can do the entire Mage's Guild while hardly knowing any magic, is a bit silly. And it can really start to take me out of the experience when I stop and think about it when I'm suddenly killing the Emperor for one of these guilds and it's treated just like another quest. This is a plot point a story would revolve around doing, not just another kill for the killy people story. But despite all that, I love these games, and very few games get me as immersed in their world while playing, because what the game lacks in narrative world building for me, it makes up for by just allowing me to explore this world in any way I want, and that's hard to replicate. There's not many games I can play now where I can just turn it on with no goals and enjoy it. It's the aesthetic and atmosphere of the world that keeps me wanting to play these games instead of the lore or stories in them, which, albeit, is a problem for an RPG, but still, I like them. I didn't mean to focus so much on the Elder Scrolls in this video, so sorry if this was a bit of a tangent. It was just a good series that I've played a bunch of to talk about how world building should affect most parts of a game. God, I'm getting good at these segues. This is something I've preached in other videos and will continue to preach, but every part of a game should make sense for it to be there, and for world building, this should be in all aspects of the game. The narrative, aesthetic, thematic, and mechanics of the game should work in tandem with the world building. Now, 3 of the 4 of these are easier. The narrative, aesthetic, and thematic can all flow together naturally through development. But tying what you create for these should impact how you design the mechanics of the game as well. Take a game like Outward that has multiple different magic systems that are all tied to the world itself, like needing different components to use certain spells, having to use rune magics in order to create sentences that create different spell effects. These magic systems not only let me interact with the world through its world building, but it also doesn't need to answer any questions about it either. And I don't know and I don't feel I need to know in universe how these magics work. The game may have answers in lore, but there's enough there from a casual perspective like mine to theorize about and guess from how it's presented to me in-game and the game systems. The mechanics fill out the world, it has you ask questions, and are engaging to use in gameplay. And that's what's important for the mechanical side of world building, to fill out the world where the player is alone or engaging with gameplay, but it's also engaging and fun to interact with. Let's do a quick hypothetical game idea really quick to get the point home. Let's say you want to make an epic fantasy game set in a Mesoamerican western that has multiple characters with different upbringings, stories, and that will also play differently to be more interactive and fun. And, oh look, someone already made it! Arco is set in that world with those different characters, where the old hardened traveler uses a bow and arrow that he learned from his childhood as a nomad, having to hunt and forage. Or the character Itse, who's an arrogant fighter that comes from a village that's part of an empire who values strength and has a personal goal to become the strongest, fights with their fist and brawn above all else. Arco's world is harsh and brutal, and you'll need all the resources you can buy, forage, or steal from others to survive, which the gameplay makes very clear by giving you very little health and items around the world to make sure you will struggle at times. Everything in Arco is part of its world and mechanics, from having you get worms from under rocks for fishing, to escorting a sheep around most of the first act protecting it, just to help your character's guilt and getting it back to its shepherd. From the giant slugs, the massive ancient structures like this hand, damn that's a good hand, to the lesser intelligent species that like sticks. So far, every decision these developers made has been about bringing their world to life and not by checking the box by saying we need to have X mechanic in this game for no reason other than to have it. Like, thank the stars there's no pointless freaking weapon system in this game. You just have your weapon, you learn new skills with it, and then instead of having a stat stick for no reason, you just get better at the game. God, it makes me so happy. This is just a good game. If you're not like me and you don't care as much about this type of world building, you will probably still have fun with it, but for me, everything this game does makes it so fucking good, it becomes beyond good. It becomes great. And most importantly, its world is what made me want to try it in the first place. World building is the thing that makes me the most interested when looking at games, especially indie games that aren't trying to hit a profit margin by doing what's popular right now to get people excited for their 19th Assassin's Creed. I love world building, doing it, learning about it, exploring it in media, and I hope you enjoyed hearing me yap about it. I would love to hear you yap about the world you love in any media form whatsoever, but for now I'm going to try and finish my revenge story. Bye-bye!